long story short, I was looking to get a finance job. I got a call from somebody who I consider a mentor, and he offered me an opportunity to go to something called Scout School.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the What's the Dill podcast. We got another great interview today. This is someone that I know through my Jersey life, my Jersey people. This is the husband of a family friend, actually the brother-in-law of our last guest, James Minogue. We have a great guy, Nick Hamilton, on. Nick, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Pete. It's an honor to be here.
Dude, so great to have you. And for all of you out there, Nick works as an MLB scout, grew up in the Cleveland area around baseball. And so I think his story is really, really cool because he's kind of working out in the professional sports world, but involved with an organization and in his personal life, bringing God into it and letting God kind of be like the leader of his life and these organizations. So I think that's super admirable. We love to see people out in the world living out their faith, man. So, dude, shout out to you, Nick.
No, thank you, Pete. I appreciate that.
So let's kind of take a step back, man. Can you tell me a little bit about how you grew up? Did you grow up around the faith? What was your faith like when you were growing up as a kid?
Grew up the oldest of 4 kids, and we all went to church. I went to Catholic schools from K through 8, and then went to public high school, and then obviously went off to college. Just kind of a typical upbringing. We went to Mass, did the holy days. I was an altar server, and really enjoyed, growing up in the faith. I was a really busy kid. I loved sports. I loved playing sports. And I think my biggest influence was my parents. Just the way that they led. It was by example. They lived their faith. The way my father and mother treated each other, just the way they raised us, it was very obvious that they were walking with the Lord. And, anything to me as a child, more is taught than taught, right? You see how the people around you, especially the people who are raising you, especially your classmates and your teachers, you see how they're living their lives, and you're more impacted probably by that, even more so than even at our age. And obviously there are plenty of examples of people going either way, even if they're raised, right, if you will. But I think it was definitely for me the example of my parents. For instance, I played a lot of travel baseball and some AAU basketball. And when you're playing travel baseball, now it means you need to run to Georgia and Florida and Alabama and all these different places. Well, back then it just meant that you were going to all these different towns in Ohio where I grew up. And so it was travel, but it was about 2-3 hours away. Nonetheless, a lot of these tournaments are on the weekend, of course, and there was no excuse in our family. You had to go to Mass. So whether it was a 7 a.m. Mass, which had the nice benefit to me as a 12-year-old of being short, but, even if it was early, or going to a Mass at a 5 p.m., you had to be creative sometimes, but one thing that was never an option was missing in our family. And some people may look at that and go, boy, that's kind of strict. But I think it showed us a lot of discipline. And for me, it really left the impression that I can follow this faith. It doesn't matter, where I'm at in my journey. I can always show up for God or do my best to. And of course, that evolution has taken on many different forms over the years, but that first impression really sticks with you, doesn't it?
Yes. And I love that example of like the power of parents. I'm a young dad. And so these things are kind of starting to come in my life of like, all right, how do I pass on the faith to my kids? How do I set these traditions? And I totally resonate with that example too, whether it was basketball tournaments or family vacation. Mom and dad were always like, all right, looking up in a bulletin. All right, we got to go to this match. It's Here we go. 7:15. The whole family comes in a row. Everyone's like, who's this family?
How did they do it before? I mean, I need to ask my parents about that now that I think about it. Because we have masstimes.org now. Like, how long has that been in existence? How did they do it before the internet was really what it is now? It's easy now. There really is no excuse. But back then, you had to look. like you said, you're probably going around the local churches, looking up bulletins or
Yeah.
something.
I think my parents would find a local church like on the drive-in and like go get a bulletin and be like, all right, they have a 7 o'clock or 12. And it's like, but it's so great what you're saying about like showing up. That's really been a theme in my own life about just like showing up for God, showing up to mass, showing up in prayer because God meets us there. And like you're saying in your life, your faith, like showing up pays off. Showing up actually does do something to our souls. So I love that example you're using.
I know one other thing for sure, and I don't mean to go on and on about this. I'm sure you have
No,
other
please go
questions.
on, man.
But just about my parents, when they needed something, when something was really important, when things felt really difficult, and it was some kind of, crisis situation, it seemed like the rosary beads always came out at that point in time. And boy, that left an impression on me too. I mean, I almost get a little choked up thinking about it, where, how impactful that is. It's the little ways that you do things.
Yeah.
I'm sure now, I certainly hope to be a parent within the next however many years, right, at that age in our lives. And, you think about how you want to raise children and what kind of impression you want to leave on them. I really hope that that's something that they catch,
Yeah.
From us someday.
Yes, man. Like that example, it goes through generations. And I think another thing that's so great about what you're sharing too, like for the listeners out there, Nick grew up in an athlete household, an athlete himself. He played baseball, minor league baseball player. His dad is a longtime announcer of the Cleveland Guardians for a long time. And I think that's so powerful that having success in the world, having success in your profession, you can still be faithful. Like our jobs don't dictate how we are faithful. We still have to show up. And I think your family's a really great example of that and an example to all of us.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was certainly lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So tell me a little bit about your kind of like sports athlete. You're a baseball player, minor league baseball player. Like, tell me about that journey.
Yeah, I mean, I played two sports growing up mainly. It was baseball and basketball. And in the summer and spring, I was obsessed with baseball. As soon as March Madness ended, it was baseball time to me. And that's about 80% of my brain was taken up by baseball stats and what was going on and reading the paper every morning for the box score. And then I think the other 20 was what I needed to do that day, obviously. And then it would be the inverse, starting in the fall, once basketball started really kicking up a little bit. Once the World Series was over, it seemed like it marked the passage of time for me. I've always loved the game of baseball, especially, and I'm very thankful for it. I grew up as someone who was hearing impaired, and obviously that was a journey in and of itself. And losing your hearing when you're 3 years old, roughly, obviously it was my parents that really had to deal with the fear and the anxiety and how are we going to pay for all of this that came with that. It wasn't me that dealt with that, but I did go to speech therapy for a number of years, and you're a little different. And so I was really thankful that growing up in Cleveland then it was the Indians. The Indians were incredible at that point in time. I know in New Jersey, all the Yankee fans don't really remember this probably because you guys were busy winning all the championships, but you usually had to beat Cleveland to get there, it felt like. We were good. And that town, Cleveland's not a big city compared to New York, compared to, I'm not sure, what the size of Newark, New Jersey is, but that feels almost as big as Cleveland sometimes as far as how many people are there. So they really rally around their sports team. And I was extremely fortunate that I had a father that had the job that he had right in the heart of it. It was on everybody's radio every night. And the town was obsessed with that team in the 90s and early 2000s. And, I was very thankful because it probably opened some doors for me socially that wouldn't have been opened otherwise. It was cool what he was doing, what the Indians were doing, and so it was pretty easy for me to fall in love with the game, and I loved it anyway, much less to have that going on. It was really, God was good to me. And so, yeah, that definitely grew my love of the game and, obviously kept going and going until I got to the point in the minor leagues where, you realize, yeah, okay, I've reached my ceiling.
Yeah, so I would love to hear more about that transition from being a minor league baseball player. You're not, you kind of feel the something inside of you saying, "All right, it's time to hang up the cleats." What was that like? And then what did you move on to?
Well, unfortunately, only Derek Jeter gets to do that, where he gets to retire. The rest of us get cut.
Right.
You just realize, look, I'm hitting 220 or whatever it was at that time, and yeah, my time's running out. And I remember distinctly as one time we played a team. It was the Dodgers farm team up in Michigan, and I forget the name of the city. I think it was Midland, Michigan. And I'm a third baseman slash outfielder at that point, so I'm paying attention to the other infielders and even some of the outfielders. But they had this Corey Seager guy, 19-year-old, first-round draft pick, taking ground balls at third base, and his shoes looked like they're 3 sizes too big on him, and he's just kind of clumsy in pregame. I'm like, okay, see, this is why you got to believe in yourself. I got this. And during the game or during the series, he hit so well that he got moved up to high A immediately afterward as a 19-year-old. And I remember getting back to the hotel after one of the games where he hit 2 home runs to the opposite field, something that I've never done in my life since Little League. And as a 19-year-old in pro baseball, and I emailed, her name was Angie, and she was the, what's the right way to put it, the guidance counselor for the athletes at Kent State. And I've been kind of putting off, I have one more semester of classes to do in order to get my business degree. And I'd been drafted, I was kind of enjoying it, and I don't know, I just got distracted and was putting it off a little bit. Mm-hmm. So it's August, and I just emailed her, like, any chance I could sign up for those classes this fall? Like, I think I need to get this degree.
I just saw Corey Seager. He's, literally might be going to his senior prom after this, just hit 2 home runs. That's incredible.
Yeah.
And, Corey Seager obviously had an incredible career.
He's a stud, and there weren't many of those.
Sure.
But those guys stood out to you, and it helped, honestly. Yeah. It was really cool to do something where you worked as hard as you could at it, believed in yourself, did everything possible, made sacrifices for it, and really got to a point where you realized, the end is coming. I'm not good enough. And it was really sobering. But at the same time, it was also cool, and I really mean that, because you're like, okay, I found out.
Yeah.
Right. Like, how many things do we really get to find out about this? Life usually gets in the way before you ever find out.
Yeah. I mean, and you also reached a potential of baseball that literally 0.1% of humans reach. It's like, that's an incredible feat, athletic feat.
Yeah.
I remember I played college basketball and I was a walk-on at Seton Hall. And I remember one of my first practices, I'm there, and I'm like, all right, I got to prove myself. And at one point in the practice, I make this move. I cross over. Oh, my gosh. I got one of my teammates. I'm going to the lane. I'm driving through the lane. I'm about to put it right on the glass, and I'm about to lay it up. And I was like, man, I might be an All-American next year. And as soon as I'm thinking that, put it on the glass, one of my teammates, 6'9", could have just swats it to the 6th row of our practice gym. And I was like, what just happened? What happened? You were nowhere near me when I started this jump. Like, where did you come from? And I just knew it was a different level. Like, that level is insane. That was just a college, high level college, but college, so.
The athletes they're so good.
Yes.
They're incredible, but it's cool. You got to find out too, right? Like you had that welcome to college basketball moment.
Yes.
Yes. Just like I was fortunate enough to have, and it certainly made me more prepared for life after, because I ended up getting into baseball. You asked how I got into it, and long story short, I was looking to get a finance job. I got a call from somebody who I consider a mentor, and he offered me an opportunity to go to something called Scout School. Okay. And that was in Arizona. He said, please just do yourself a favor. I know you love the game. Give this a shot. It's a good way to get in on the business side of the game someday. And so that was appealing to me. And I gave it a try, and darn it, I didn't want to like this as much as I do. And so I fell in love, and I've been very fortunate, to work in baseball for the time that I have. Yeah. And it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. So that's awesome. So you go from minor league baseball player, you're an MLB scout, you get into scout school, you're an MLB scout, and you mentioned your faith kind of grew around this time. So walk me through this kind of like, how did you let Jesus into your heart more as you're a working man, MLB scout? Like what was that like?
After that time period, I realized that, church was home. The
Yeah.
Catholic Church was home. And, I really recommitted myself to it, and I really made that choice. For me, anyway, now looking into the future, it's really deepened how I feel about my faith, what, aspects of my faith I really pay closer attention to.
Yeah.
Just having a relationship with God. I spent a lot of time on the road, Pete, and
Yeah.
driving, and something my dad always taught me was, you know, you don't always have to just pray the rosary
Mm,
or whatever structured prayer is. You can just talk to God sometimes.
yes.
Like, in fact, you should do it every day.
Yes.
So, when you're driving, sometimes it's time to turn the podcast off and just sit there
Yeah.
for 20 minutes and just say nothing, or just talk to God, whatever comes up. But just praying, just Holy Spirit, just guide me,
Yes.
and that's really been beneficial. And again, just deepening my faith by staying committed to it, and learning more about it. I
Yeah.
find that for me anyway, again, everyone's journey is different,
Hmm.
but the more I know about something, the ins and outs of it, the more committed I can be to something.
Yeah.
And the more I understand what it is, why I'm doing this, it's never been easy for me to just take orders.
Yeah.
And so, for me, just knowing more about my faith has been easily the biggest step in that journey, whether it's reading Bible in a year. I know a lot of people listen to Father Mike Schmitz.
Hmm.
I'm sure a lot of your listeners do,
Hmm.
or the Catechism in a year,
Yeah.
things like that, where you just really learn the ins and outs of your faith and the why behind what we do. It makes
Yeah.
a lot more sense.
What's so beautiful, I think, about our Catholic faith is this relationship. Like you're saying, I love that you're saying you have this relationship, talking to God, personal. I know if I've had to grow in that. But then also the intellectual side. Hey, there's catechisms and writers and early church writers. There is so much depth here that if you
Yeah.
want to know more, there's so much there. And that I think is a great kind of entry point for a lot of people. The intellectual, the relationship, like there's a lot here to dig into. It's not just like taking orders. Like sometimes when we're kids, it feels like we're just taking orders from parents. Like, all right, don't do this, don't
Yeah.
do that, show up to this. So it's such a beautiful and I think such real witness.
Yeah, and what I think I've grown to appreciate is how thoughtful the Catholic Church is.
Mm.
I think it gets the reputation, and in a negative sense, usually, it's an old church that
Yeah.
has all these archaic views that are out of touch with today's time. If I could sum up maybe the criticism of
Hmm.
people who maybe are Christian and just kind of look at Catholic Church and it's just not something that speaks to them, right?
Yeah.
What I think I've really grown to appreciate is just the thought process behind everything.
Yeah.
Everything was well thought out.
Oh yeah.
And there's a lot of gray area in life. I think sometimes now, especially in our social media era, what can be a little toxic is everything has to be, in a world that has a lot of gray area and a lot of noise now.
Yeah.
I think what cuts through the noise is polarization, black and white,
Yeah.
as far as, and I'm not getting into that. I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
it's got to be this or that.
Right.
And it's all one thing or all the other thing, and there's
Right.
no room for nuance. And I think when you actually read the Catechism or you read the Bible, and you see that, hey, everybody in the Catholic Church acknowledges life is messy,
Yes.
and there is nuance in life, and they explore that and explain it the best that they can, while
Hmm.
still leaving room for you to experience life as you experience it, and just develop your own thoughts and feelings about it. I've felt more free and less restricted since
Yeah.
learning more about that than I ever did before.
Mm.
Knowledge, I don't know who coined the phrase knowledge is power, but that is actually true, I guess.
Yeah. Schoolhouse Rock, maybe I think it was.
Well,
Yeah.
the OG.
Yeah, the OG knowledge about. I love that. Yeah, that's so powerful, man. I appreciate it. And I think for all of us, like hearing you say that, it's so powerful and a great inspiration to kind of keep learning more, always continue learning more. Did you find Bible in a year? You say you've listened to that Catechism in a year. Have you learned a lot from that? I know I've listened to Bible in a year. I've learned a ton. I'm not done with it yet.
Yeah,
2 years in, still not done, but I know I've learned. Have you learned a lot from those?
I have. I have. I think
Yeah.
we know the Gospels a little bit. Having someone actually sit there and explain it. I mean, unless you studied to be a priest, um, who has had the opportunity to sit there with a priest every day, read, 2 chapters, say, of the
Right.
Bible, and have it explained to you in layman's terms, in real life? Yeah, we do that at Mass every weekend, so that's why it's important to go to Mass, of course, among other reasons. But that was really eye-opening for me,
Yeah.
was having that. It definitely brought it to life a little more. It wasn't words on a page anymore. It really brought it to life.
Right. Yes.
Even Numbers and Deuteronomy, or I know I just mispronounced it, but, even some of the drier parts of the
Yes.
Bible were brought to life through that process and gave you an appreciation for it.
Amen. Amen, brother. So connecting kind of your story here, you talked about the sports world, baseball, talked about your faith journey. Connecting both of those, tell me about the I Am Second movement, because I've seen a lot of this. I've heard a lot of big things, but I don't know a ton. Can you tell me about what I Am Second is and what your involvement is in it?
I wish I could tell you sometimes. I don't really know. It's just a hashtag that started going around in college when I was in college. So, especially once I got drafted, I think I'm certainly guilty of getting a big head at times at that point in time, and probably thought more people were checking out my social media profile than really were. But that being said, I was like, gosh, how do I express my faith? I'm not comfortable being Tim Tebow. That's not me. I don't have that personality. Anyone listening can tell that right off the bat. And so, how do I do it in my own way? And that movement kind of came around. It was very simple. It's just a hashtag in your social media profile. It basically, almost like the early Christians, that sign of the cross, it
Yeah.
it kind of marked you as like, hey, I'm not going to, you don't have to say anything else. You know that I'm Christian. And you know that I
Yes.
look at life in a way that places me second behind,
Yeah.
God's plans, whatever they are. And, I think Rick Warren was the author of that book, Purpose Driven Life. And the
Yep.
first line in that book, I remember reading that. And it was a book that my mom had me read. And when I was in high school, and the first line of that book was, "It's not about you." And, I think to an 18-year-old Nick, that really, was a splash of water in the face
Yeah.
for sure. And,
Yes.
and I thought that was a good way to express it. Again, I don't know what the organization is just behind all of that, but it was just something that became really popular, and I was
Yeah.
like, well, this is talk about a cause I can get behind,
Yeah.
And again, just doing it in a way that was just kind of authentic to me. I'm a little more understated, maybe.
100%. And it that understatedness can actually go a long way. There was this interview with Jordan Love, the quarterback. I don't know if you saw that, but like
I'm a
he was just.
huge Packers fan.
Are
Yes,
you really?
huge.
All right, all right, Pat. So, did you see that one where Jordan Love was, I think, preseason? He had the I Am Second wristband, and the interview was like, "Oh, like what is that?" And he just went right into it, and it was like this huge
Yeah.
witness. They're obviously talking about football, but just that simple phrase, "I am second," sparked a conversation, which sparked a video, which sparked clips being made on it, and like he was able to witness the gospel just by having that. I think in a world full of Tim Tebows, we need like people that are just having I am second, because like you're saying, we all can't be Tim Tebow.
Right.
Like we're not all called to be that. Even the early Christians, like you're saying, some were a little, some were preaching, some were healing, some were writing, some they all had different roles. And I think our church, we have to remember that we're all part of the body. We're all doing different roles, and I am second's authentic to you. It's gonna be authentic to a lot of people.
I'm definitely happy that Jordan Love has joined the movement.
Yeah.
I certainly noticed that. And I've noticed that a lot of athletes are
Yeah.
getting more outspoken about their Christianity. I'm a huge Ohio State Buckeye fan as
Okay.
well.
Yeah.
I would say I like the Packers more. Made me choose which one to watch. But of course, the Buckeyes ran off and had that national championship run.
Yeah.
And one thing that they were doing that caught a lot of people's attention before the season was these campus, I don't know what you would call them, but just gatherings, if you
Yeah.
will, where all of these, and they were star players on the team, were
Mm-hmm.
sharing their testimony. And
I
so
th-
I think, again, leading by example, people who have it all in their case, it seems like at 21 years old, I can't imagine what it's like to be a star football player
yeah.
at such a high profile university, and knowing that the NFL is right around the corner for you. And they want to make sure that the whole world knows that this is why they do what they do.
Yeah.
And hopefully things like that are, kind of working their way into the culture and making it more acceptable to speak out.
One final question I want to get into. If someone's watching this, listening to this, and they're really passionate about their career, they're really passionate about their goals. What would you say to them to say, hey, like, but they're maybe not sure about where they fall in their faith? What would you say to them about, hey, like, give God a shot, let Jesus into your heart more? Like, what would you say to someone?
I would say welcome to the club. I think a lot of people, and I think as men we really battle this, especially. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that women don't, obviously, but I spend a lot of time around men in my industry, in the scouting world, and there's definitely a push to put the career first, and
Yeah.
even at the expense sometimes of maybe really other really important things in your life. And I think what to say to someone would be, first of all, I hope that they would see, if I could wish for anything, as far as being a witness to God and being a witness to Christ and being a witness for the Catholic Church in my small little way, in my small world, would be, I would hope people would see me and go, he seems really happy. He seems really at peace. I want to be like that, And so I think that's the first and foremost thing is, just opening up the conversation, being willing to talk to people about God, understanding God may have placed you in this position where you have an opportunity to make an impact, and to multiply for his kingdom. And it doesn't always, sometimes we think of it, I'm not in sales here, but as like making the sale or, winning, that's
Yes.
what I tend to think more of, winning and losing. And sometimes I think there's a tendency to think, well, we just got to convert them right here. And
Right.
sometimes it's slower than that. Sometimes it happens like that, and sometimes it's a little slower. And you just spend more time and gain more curiosity around it, and you just hope to be encouraging and just open up the conversation in a way that lets them know that you're there. They ever have questions, and they, doubts, concerns, even if it's just to point them to a resource that may give them the answers, because I know for one, I certainly don't have all the answers. I'm not a theologian. I'm not St. Thomas Aquinas here. So, but, he and many other people have thought deeply about these things and formulated those thoughts in a way that are really accessible, and maybe you can point them to some resources down the line. But biggest thing is just letting them know that you're there. I'm here for you.
Well, Nick, I think that's a perfect place to bring our conversation to a close. This has gone really fast. I feel like we could keep talking. I've really, really enjoyed this. I'm really inspired by your faith journey, and kind of where you've brought your faith through the years. I totally resonate with it. So appreciate you sharing everything. This is really incredible, man. I just really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Pete. I'm certainly humbled to be here. So thanks for having me on.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for checking out this episode. Make sure you like, subscribe, share this with someone who you think might like it. Appreciate you as always. Reach out with a comment. Love to hear your thoughts on this episode, what you think about your faith journey, growing up Catholic, being a professional in the working world, and how you are faithful in that, like Nick was talking about. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. So, as always, y'all, appreciate you stopping by. I'll talk to you soon. Peace. Bye.